In the bustling heart of Manhattan, inside a sleek, high-end cafe on Lexington Avenue, a small human moment pierced through the glass and steel indifference of elite life. A black waitress, balancing trays and time constraints, broke every rule she knew to share a dance. Quiet, spontaneous, and unseen, with a little blind girl. That act, unnoticed by most, became the tremor that shifted the tectonic plates of two very different lives. Because sometimes, resistance isn't loud. It sways gently, hand in hand with a child who can't see but still senses everything. And that's how it begins. Kiara's day started as most did. Late. The 6:12. A train had stalled outside 149th Street again, forcing her to run the remaining 8 blocks from Grand Central. The elevator in her building was out of order again, and she spilled coffee on her only clean shirt while chasing the bus. By the time she stepped into Larkin Row, New York's most discreetly overpriced cafe, she was out of breath, out of patience, but never out of grace. At 33, Kiara had learned that survival in the city meant showing up clean, quiet, and invisible. She did all three. The customers didn't notice her. They never did. Lawyers in gray suits, tech bros in Allbirds, gallery assistants glued to iPads. They looked at the menu, not the woman holding it. "She's just the waitress," someone had whispered yesterday within earshot. Not at her. About her. Kiara had stopped flinching at things like that long ago. Invisibility, she had decided, could be armor. In the back room, Kiara stashed her purse and pulled a small, battered book from her bag. Bell Hooks, in All About Love. She had started this same copy 10 years ago in college, before her mother's stroke derailed everything. Tucked into the spine was a faded photo. Her and Mama, smiling at a campus protest. She placed the book gently in her locker, beside her apron and name tag. It was still hers, even if her sociology degree was not. Mid-morning brought the usual onslaught. Quad-shot oat milk lattes, passive-aggressive brunches, murmured complaints about foam art. That's when she saw her. A little girl, no older than 5, stood awkwardly near the counter. Big sunglasses, white cane dangling from one hand, fingers twitching in the air like antennae. Lost. Alone. Kiara glanced around. No parent in sight. No one else noticed. Her body moved before her brain did. She crouched beside the child and whispered, "Hey, sweet pea. You okay?" The girl turned her face toward the sound, but didn't speak. Kiara took a deep breath. "Want to hear a song?" She began to hum, a soft, bluesy tune her mother used to sing when Kiara had nightmares. She didn't expect a response. But then the little girl's mouth curled into a smile. Her fingers started tapping rhythm into the air. She was dancing. So Kiara danced with her, just a slow sway of shoulders, hands barely moving. Quiet joy in a corner of a corporate world, a throat cleared behind her. The mother had arrived. Sharp pantsuit, high heels, hair like a Vogue editorial. She looked expensive, efficient, and furious. "What exactly is going on here?" she snapped, grabbing the girl's hand. Kiara stood, heart racing. She was lost. "You're not paid to entertain children," hissed the cafe manager, who had materialized at the worst possible time. "You know who that was?" he growled after the mother stormed off. "That's Ellen Carter, Carter Industries. She's worth half of Midtown." Kiara didn't respond. She had nothing to say that wouldn't get her fired. Instead, she got a formal warning. No personal interaction with clients. No talking to children. "If you want to perform," the manager said coldly, Do it on your own time. She nodded, throat tight, hands shaking. Her rent was due in 3 days. That night, alone in her apartment, Kiara reread her favorite passage from Bell Hooks. True love is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. She closed the book and let herself cry, not from sadness, from something else. That moment with the little girl had woken a part of her that she thought she had buried beneath shifts and subway delays. The next day, Ellen Carter returned. She stood by the counter, cool and unreadable, clutching a takeaway espresso. Kiara froze. "You're the one who danced with my daughter," Ellen said flatly. Kiara braced for another complaint, but instead Ellen continued, "She hasn't smiled like that in months." Then softer. "Since her father passed." There was a pause. Ellen handed her a folded bill. "Thank you." Kiara glanced down. $500, neatly creased. Her stomach twisted. She handed it back. "I didn't dance for money," she said. For a moment, Ellen just stared. Then she nodded once, an almost imperceptible flick of her chin, and left. That night, Kiara walked home slower than usual. The city buzzed around her, but she felt apart from it. Lighter. She didn't know that the next morning, she'd be called into a meeting that would change her life. She didn't know that a woman with more money than she could fathom had started asking questions about a waitress who danced with her blind daughter, about invisible people with indelible hearts. At home, Kiara opened her locker. The photo slipped from her book. Her fingers traced the words underlined in ink. Small acts can lead to seismic shifts. She didn't believe in signs, but she did believe in rhythm, and something in the air had shifted. The next morning, Kiara stepped off the subway a stop early. She wasn't ready to walk into the cafe. Not yet. The air on Madison Avenue smelled like rain and ambition. She adjusted her thrifted blazer and stared up at the monolithic glass tower rising into the clouds. The building looked like it belonged to another planet. Carter Industries, the brass letters read. She still wasn't sure if the invitation had been a mistake. Security didn't think so. "Appointment with Ms. Carter," the front desk attendant said into her headset. "Yes, she's expected." Kiara was not used to marble floors or digital passes. The elevator alone was intimidating, sleek, silent, and fast enough to make her knees go soft. By the time she reached the 41st floor, her heart had moved somewhere between her ears. "Ms. Carter will see you now," said the assistant, who barely looked older than 22 but wore heels like she was born in them. Ellen Carter's office was minimalist and pristine. White walls, black leather furniture, one enormous window looking out over the city like a throne. Ellen stood, gesturing to a chair. "I'll be direct," she said. "I'm starting a new division at my foundation, one focused on developmental support for children with disabilities, especially sensory impairments. I need someone who understands what connection looks like beyond therapy manuals." Kiara blinked. "You want me to?" "Be part of it," Ellen replied. "Help design it. Help run it." Kiara sat in stunned silence. "I'm not a teacher. I'm not a therapist. I'm not even," she laughed dryly, "qualified." "You're human," Ellen said simply. "And you saw my daughter." For a long moment, Kiara said nothing. She didn't know what she was feeling. Suspicion, hope, panic. "Why me?" she finally asked. "Because my daughter danced," Ellen replied. "And because you didn't take the money." Kiara left the building in a fog. Outside, people hurried past with their phones and purpose. but her mind was elsewhere. Her mother would have told her to say yes. Her mother had believed in impact. Quiet, honest, grassroots impact. But Kiara had seen what happened when poor black women were turned into poster children for the rich. Used, applauded, discarded. That night, she sat in her tiny kitchen, staring at her reflection in the microwave door. Could she trust this? Was it a gift or a trap? She thought of the girl's fingers moving in the air, the smile that bloomed without warning. She remembered how her own heart had answered. The next day, she returned to Carter Industries, not with a yes, but with a maybe. Ellen raised an eyebrow. "I won't be a token," Kiara said. "Good," Ellen replied. "I won't pretend to be a savior." A few days later, Ellen invited her to a private roundtable for early-stage planning. A sleek boardroom, all gray suits and jargon. No one looked like Kiara. Most didn't look at her at all. They spoke in clinical terms. Underserved populations. At-risk communities. Behavioral engagement. And then someone said it. Well, they just don't have exposure. That's why they act out. Kiara sat up. They? The room fell still. "I grew up in the Bronx," she said, her voice steady. "I read bell hooks on the D train. My mother died in a public hospital waiting for a social worker to notice her. We don't act out. We survive what you ignore." A pause. "I'm sorry," said one of the attendees. "I didn't mean—" "You did," Kiara said. "But maybe now you'll learn." After the meeting, Ellen found her near the elevator. "You could have let that go," she said. "I don't let things go when kids are involved." Ellen folded her arms. "You embarrassed me in front of my advisory team." "No," Kiara replied. "They embarrassed you. I just said it out loud." The next few days were tense. Emails became shorter. Meeting invites didn't come. Kiara thought maybe that was it. She'd spoken too plainly, refused to play the game. Maybe she was about to be cut loose. But then something unexpected happened. Ellen sent her a voice memo late at night. "You were right," she said quietly. "She hasn't smiled like that in months, and I don't know how to reach her. But you do." In the weeks that followed, something began to shift. Kiara was asked to spend time with Ellen's daughter, not as a nanny or caregiver, but as a companion. She recorded audiobooks for her, soft, lyrical renditions of stories she remembered from her own childhood. The little girl would listen with her fingers pressed lightly against the speaker, as if absorbing the voice through skin. Ellen walked in once and found them humming together. Two heads bowed, one child and one woman who had once forgotten what softness sounded like. Still, Kiara had not signed any contract. When Ellen finally asked, Kiara said, "I'll work with you, but we're building something bigger. This can't just be your redemption project." "What do you have in mind?" Ellen asked. "Something real. A program led by the women who are usually just the subjects of your studies. From the Bronx, from East New York, from Newark. We don't need spokespeople, we need authors." Ellen hesitated. "No cameras," Kiara added. "No PR. You're asking me to fund something that no one will ever know came from me." Kiara looked at her. "Exactly," and Ellen said, "Okay." Not easily, not without pushback, but she agreed. And one morning, as the city outside bustled past in its usual rush, a small girl with her fingers in the air called softly from the next room. "Tia Kiki?" Kiara turned. "Yes, baby." "Can you teach me how to feel the music again?" In that moment, Kiara knew. This was already working. not because of foundations or funding or metrics, but because a child remembered the music in her fingers, and because a woman who had once been invisible was now setting the rhythm. 6 months later, the rhythm was no longer a whisper. It was a steady, deliberate beat echoing through places it had never reached before. The program had a name now: Second Route. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't announced with confetti or press releases. But in rec centers, church basements, and library meeting rooms across New York's forgotten zip codes, something was growing. Kiara sat at the back of a sunlit hall in East Harlem, watching as a woman in her 40s with salt-streaked braids addressed a room of teen girls. "They'll tell you the world doesn't want your voice," she said. But the truth is, they're just afraid of what happens when you start using it." Kiara didn't say much anymore in these sessions. She didn't have to. She'd gone from waitress to founder, from cautionary tale to quiet blueprint, and the blueprint was working. Not because she was the face of it, but because she'd refused to be. The shift wasn't just in the neighborhoods. It was at the top. In the polished boardrooms of Carter Industries, Ellen Carter's tone had changed too. She spoke differently now, less like a keynote, more like a student. Once, during a quarterly meeting, she paused mid-slide and said, "I thought I knew what leadership was, but it turns out I just knew how to win." After the meeting, she found Kiara in the hallway and said, "I grew up poor, but somewhere along the way, I started measuring worth by things that can be auctioned. You reminded me what I actually lost." Kiara didn't respond with praise. She nodded once and said, "So don't lose it again." Back in the cafe where it had all started, a new waitress leaned into a coworker and whispered, "See that woman over there? Talking to the city council rep? She used to work here." The coworker blinked. "No way." The first woman nodded. "Yep. Table 6. Every Saturday." The world didn't always change with a bang. Sometimes it shifted on the weight of whispers. Kiara hadn't gone back to school. Not yet. The university had sent a letter, offering to reinstate her on scholarship. She kept it pinned to the corkboard above her desk, right next to a sticky note that said, "Not yet, but soon." In a windowless room in Lower Manhattan, a bill was passed unanimously. It proposed mandatory community worker representation on municipal advisory boards. The press covered the politicians, but the real architect sat quietly in the audience. No microphone, no headline. Just Kiara, in a worn blazer and clean sneakers. Ellen spoke at the podium. "She didn't ask for this. She acted. And because she acted, my daughter dances again. That's all the credential I need." That night, Kiara sat at her kitchen table with her mother's photograph propped up beside a notebook labeled Fall Lectures. She scribbled in the margins, reread old notes, and allowed herself, for the first time in years, to plan a future that wasn't just survival. Her mother had died nearly a year ago. Some nights, Kiara still reached for the phone before remembering there'd be no answer. But tonight, her grief didn't ache. It pulsed like a gentle echo. A reminder, not a wound. There was a knock at the door. Ellen stood there with her daughter. No bodyguards, no driver. Just two people visiting. The little girl rushed in and spun clumsily on the floor, arms wide. "I'm dancing, Tia Kiki," she yelled. Kiara smiled. "I see you, baby." They stayed for dinner. Nothing fancy. Rice, greens, fried fish. The kind of meal Kiara's mother used to make when the light bill was paid on time. Ellen helped with the dishes. "I want her to grow up around women like you," she said, not looking up. Kiara dried her hands and said, "Then don't just visit. Stay invested." As the night faded, they danced again. All three of them. No music, just footsteps and laughter and the soft rhythm of possibility. Later, when Kiara was alone, she opened a small box under her bed. Inside was her old name badge from the cafe. Kira, server. She held it in her palm for a long time. Then she placed it in a cardboard box labeled past, not forgotten. Above her desk, she pinned one more line in her own handwriting. Invisible doesn't mean non-existent. We were always here, just waiting for the world to listen.